Once upon a time, there lived a merchant named Hiroshi. He was one of the wealthiest men in the village, owning vast fields, a bustling shop, and a grand house. Yet, despite his riches, Hiroshi was known to be a man who rarely shared. "What I have, I earned," he often said, brushing off beggars and ignoring the needs of the less fortunate. One day, a great drought struck the village. The river ran low, crops withered, and many families struggled to find enough food to eat. Villagers turned to Hiroshi for help, knowing he had stored away plenty of grain and supplies. But Hiroshi, fearing the drought might last and deplete his wealth, turned them away. "I must protect what's mine. If I give too much, I may have nothing left," he said. One morning, as Hiroshi sat counting his gold coins, an old monk appeared at his doorstep. The monk, dressed in a tattered robe, carried nothing but a wooden staff and a kind smile. "Good morning, Hiroshi," the monk greeted. "What brings you here, monk?" Hiroshi asked. The monk looked around at the grand house and said, "I've heard of your wealth and prosperity. Surely a man as fortunate as you must know the joy of giving." "Joy of giving? That's a foolish notion. Giving only makes you lose what you have," Hiroshi replied. The monk tilted his head, his eyes twinkling. "Would you be willing to join me on a small journey?" "I wish to show you something," the monk invited. Curious and slightly amused by the monk's confidence, Hiroshi agreed. The two of them walked to the edge of the village, where the fields were dry and the villagers worked tirelessly under the scorching sun. They passed a poor farmer who had only a handful of rice left. Yet, when a starving child approached him, the farmer smiled, broke the rice in half, and shared it. Hiroshi. He barely has enough for himself. Why would he give it away? Monk. Let's keep walking. Next, they came across a widow who had saved her last loaf of bread. She too gave a portion to a hungry neighbor who had nothing to eat. Hiroshi. If she gives away her bread, how will she survive? Monk. Do you think they are weaker for what they have given? Hiroshi. Yes, they've made themselves more vulnerable. The monk chuckled softly and led Hiroshi to a riverbank where a dying tree stood. Its branches were bare and its trunk leaned weakly to one side. Yet, from its roots flowed a small spring of water, providing life to the plants around it. The monk knelt by the spring and touched the water. Mo. This tree could hoard the water for itself, trying to grow stronger alone. But by sharing what it has, it ensures the survival of the plants around it. And in turn, those plants protect its roots, shading the ground and preserving the soil. By giving, the tree receives more than it ever could by keeping everything for itself. Hiroshi stood in silence, staring at the tree. He thought of the farmer, the widow, and the monk's words. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the spring, about the joy on the faces of those who had shared what little they had, and about how isolated he felt despite his wealth. The next morning, Hiroshi did something he had never done before. He opened his granaries and invited the villagers to take what they needed. At first he hesitated, but as he saw the smiles on their faces and heard their words of gratitude, something inside him shifted. For the first time, he felt a sense of peace and purpose he had never known. Over time, Hiroshi's generosity inspired others in the village to give as well. The drought eventually ended, but the bonds formed during that time of giving endured. And Hiroshi, once a man consumed by his fear of losing, became known as the kindest man in the village. A man whose heart grew richer the more he gave. When you give to others, you don't lose. You gain something far greater: connection, gratitude, and the joy of seeing others thrive. The The power of charity is not just in changing others' lives, but in transforming your own.